Good evening, everybody. I'm Nicholas Sarwark, chairman of the Libertarian National Committee. Thank you for joining us for another episode of LPTV. We got all of your viewer comments, and so I changed my backdrop to something more appropriate for the times. This presentation of LPTV, this is a program that we've started to try and get communication out to our membership, create that sense of community while many of us are socially distancing for public health and safety. A lot more has gone virtual, and we want to make sure that Libertarian Party members and Libertarian Party supporters around the country are given the information that they need to keep up to date with what we're doing to cope with this new environment, what we're doing to adapt and show that we are the political party most competent to deal with rapid change. You know, the two old parties are old and not really comfortable with this new environment, and the Libertarian Party is been able to show that leadership. So last episode, you can go find it in the archives, we talked about what you can do from a medical and health and safety perspective to deal with this coronavirus pandemic, how you can be helpful, how we can make good decisions for each other, how we can help the helpers, and how local government officials can work with the medical community to do the right things to make people safer, but without that loss of liberty and that overbearing governmental response that we've had. This evening's episode is going to focus on ballot access. As you all know, the Libertarian Party does not have automatic ballot access in all 50 states. There are things we have to do, and we're very good at doing them. In 2016, we had all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Our presidential candidate was on the ballot with the other parties' presidential candidates. We were one of only 3 political parties in the country to do that, and the only one that's good. This time around, it's going to be a little different because in the age of social distancing, it is a public health and safety risk for us to be going out into the general public with a clipboard, being in close proximity to other people, potentially spreading an infectious disease. We don't want to do that. That's not what the Libertarian Party is all about. And we still need to deal with some of these legal requirements that were created prior to the coronavirus pandemic. So we've brought on some great guests tonight who are dealing with this problem in the various states to talk about what they're doing in their states, as well as to talk about the big picture nationally of how ballot access is working. So the first guest I'd like to invite on is Ryan Graham. He's chairman of the Libertarian Party of Georgia. Hi, Ryan. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing great. All right. I see you've got your headset on. You're ready for this era of social distancing.
Yeah.
Tell me about what are the ballot access requirements in Georgia for president and then any statewide office and for lower level offices?
Yeah, so our requirements are a little weird because they're split. The good news is that for all statewide races, that includes Senate, President, Governor, any of those statewide races, we actually have ballot access. And as long as we continue to run candidates in those spots and they continue to get at least 1% of active registered voters who vote for them, then we maintain that ballot access. And we've been very successful at that throughout the years. Unfortunately, any districted partisan races, we still have to collect signatures for. And the number of signatures for that is 5% of the active registered voters in the last election. So it's pretty large. Right now, we have one candidate for U.S. House. That's a districted race. And it requires 24,503 valid signatures to get on to the ballot. And there's a lot that goes into, what is an active registered voter. It's been in the news all along about, them dropping people from the voter rolls and the voter rolls being kind of garbage in Georgia. We've made national news over the last, year, 2 years on just that. And a lawsuit that's ongoing. We actually have somebody in Secretary of State that has admitted on the record saying that there's no way for candidates to actually validate their own signatures, that the Secretary of State is basically the only office that can do it. So we have a huge hurdle. Ballot access experts have said that we are, if we're not in the top 5, we are the hardest state to get on the ballot.
Okay. And just to put that in context, so for U.S. House, a normal congressional district, That's 24,503 valid signatures. Now, if we didn't have access statewide in Georgia, if we were a party that didn't have that and hadn't kept that, what's the requirement to put a candidate on for president of the United States, statewide in the entire state of Georgia?
It's 1% of active registered voters, of which I think there's 7.5 million active registered voters right now, because we also have automatic registration, which, I think is a win as a civilian, as a civically minded person. But then you start looking at it and you're like, well, now you're increasing my signature requirement. So, but 7.5 million out of 10.5 million Georgians. So it would be, I think, like 75,000 to get on a statewide race.
Okay.
Statewide ballot. So interestingly enough, the Georgia Green Party and the Georgia Constitution Party filed a lawsuit on behalf of collecting signatures for the president some years ago. 4 or 5 years ago, they won the case, and the judge sort of arbitrarily, I'm not sure exactly how they pulled the number out, but they reduced that number to 7,500.
So okay, I'm sort of following, and you have to bear with me. I am a lawyer, but Georgia sounds like it's pretty screwed up.
Yeah.
So it would be 7,500 signatures for president if we had to collect those, 75,000 and change for, say, governor.
Correct.
24,000 and change for Congress, and then some number for the lower level offices. So the requirements in Georgia sound like they're all over the map. What have you done in Georgia to try and deal with these challenges? Both, I guess you've been working on stuff before this started, before the coronavirus pandemic, but there's also some other stuff going on now. So let's talk about what you were doing before.
Okay, yeah. So we started our lawsuit, I think it was in 2017. We are suing on behalf of U.S. House candidates to reduce the number of signatures. We basically said that if the president requires 7,500, then 20,000 to 25,000, which is what the average is, like somewhere in that band for all U.S. House, is absolutely ridiculous, and that they are restricting our First Amendment rights of speech by not letting us on the ballot and putting up unnecessary barriers, essentially. So we have that lawsuit ongoing. We actually lost in the Georgia court based on other opinions that were given by the 11th Circuit of Appeals. And so we feel pretty good that the opinion that was given in the Georgia court actually was basically, you guys made a lot of really good points, but we don't feel like we can overturn things that were made in the court above us. So you need to go to the court above us. So we filed our appeal with the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. And our court date for that we have oral arguments on May 19th that neither side actually asked for. We asked for we made a motion to expedite make a summary judgment, but they didn't give it to us and said, you got to give oral whatever.
Maybe they just like your lawyers.
Yeah, but I mean, so the lawyer says that's a good sign, right? That they want to hear from us. Nobody asked you to hear from us. They just are like, well, this is interesting. So I think it's a good sign that it's interesting to them.
Okay. And so that would be something that would reduce the amount of signatures for any office that's below statewide to try and bring it in line with something more reasonable.
And
like
what we're really hoping for is that it decreases by at least the same amount that the president did. So if the president went from 7,500,000 or 75,000 to 7,500, we would hope that it would drop proportionally.
Everything else would drop by tenfold. So you'd be at like 2,500 for House. You'd be at that 7,500 for statewide, and that would help you guys a lot. So that's heading for oral argument, which probably will be done by Zoom since it's May 19th and nobody's going out in public. What else is going on with the petition signatures you'd have to gather for U.S. House or lower level district offices? How long do you have to petition in Georgia to get those signatures?
We have 180 days before the date that they're due. So they're due in July, which usually puts us in it's usually mid-January to mid-July.
Okay, so that period obviously goes with this social distancing, and I think you guys have a statewide stay-at-home order now.
Yeah.
Because your governor learned some new things that he just found out about yesterday. What what are you doing to deal with that? To deal with the fact that, for example, this 24,500 signatures, you can't go out and get those in public right now without endangering other people. So have you done anything legally to try and deal with that?
Well, yeah. So the first thing we did was we sent an official letter to the Secretary of State asking them to waive all of the requirements to petition, just based on public safety. The CDC has been saying for some time now that social distancing is the right thing to do, and not to go outside if you don't need to. So
Well,
I
they're
don't.
based in Georgia.
They are based in Georgia. Yeah, we have a lot of CDC employees here. I know a few. It's hard not to if you live in Georgia.
Yeah.
So they basically they never responded to me, but what they did was they sent out a letter to all the candidates saying that what they could do was extend the number of days that petitioning would happen. So Georgia Code says that they can extend it 45 days. They opted instead to extend it only 31 days. And that was because they said if they extended it more than 31 days, that would be too much time. They wouldn't be able to finalize the ballots and get them ready for the election itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're running up against time both ways.
Well, 31 days, we're already, the CDC has already said through April 30th. So we're already greater than 31 days of, out of pocket on actually being able to collect signatures. So what we did was we talked to our lawyer in our Ballot Access lawsuit and said, hey, do we have a case here? And he said, absolutely. And I think it was a few short days later, we filed a lawsuit with Martin Cowan, who is our candidate for U.S. House, Jimmy Cooper, who is a Green Party candidate for U.S. House, and the Georgia Green Party was added to it so that we'd have grounds to talk about petitioning for the presidential election as well.
Okay. And where is that lawsuit in the process?
It's just filed. So we don't have any kind of court date or anything like that. We have sent a letter to the Secretary of State's legal counsel asking them to just, not fight it and just say, this is, what we would like to see from it. And what we're asking for them is to prorate the number of signatures based on the CDC guideline to practice social distancing. So as long as that's there, then we shouldn't have to do it. And then they should prorate the number of signatures from the 7 days after when that requirement drops, recommendation drops.
We did a little math before we started the show because nobody wants to watch people do math on camera. And so for that 24,500 or so signatures for U.S. House, that would mean roughly every week that you're not able to petition because of social distancing, that would drop that number by about 1,000 signatures.
Right.
And then a similar kind of reduction, basically 1/25th of the number of signatures each week that is not available because of this social distancing.
Yeah, and we are, the hope would be that it would affect all political. So we're called political bodies in Georgia. We're not even considered a political party, which is whatever, neither here nor there. But for all political body and independent candidates. So it would affect a few dozen candidates down ballot as well. The important thing to note is, some of the usual excuses they have of overcrowding the ballot would not really be enforced here as one. They mostly go unopposed anyway, but the qualifying period is already passed. So we're not talking about adding the ability to add any candidates after the fact. It's just, it would only affect the candidates who have already qualified.
And the Libertarian Party of Georgia has in the past been able to qualify candidates for various offices. We've been able to meet very large petition requirements before. Is that right?
Well, actually, we only have statewide ballot access through a quirk of our special election process. So special elections do not require petitioning because they are technically, legally nonpartisan, even though letters still show up next to people's names. So, for instance, we have this, Kelly Loeffler is in the Senate seat right now, and we have one candidate there, but there's however many Republicans and however many Democrats and however many independents. It's over 20 candidates in that race. They all show up on the ballot because they're nonpartisan. So we actually had a special election, I think it was back in the 90s, for Public Service Commission, where we put somebody on the ballot and then we got our 1% and we just maintained it from there. So we didn't actually even get on the ballot through petitioning on that one.
So if Ms. Loeffler gets to go on vacation for her financial decisions, there could be another special election. You wouldn't have to petition for that.
That's correct.
You guys have interesting politicians in Georgia, and if you guys are political bodies, does that make the other parties political antibodies?
You would hope so. No, they are actually political parties.
Oh, it's well, they're
We're
no
not a
fun.
party.
They're not fun parties like ours.
That's true.
Well, that's great what you guys are doing. I hope to hear a lot more. Is there anything that you need from either Libertarian Party members around the country or Libertarian Party members in Georgia to help you succeed in the lawsuits, or provide you those resources?
It's always just so this one, we don't have any resources. For the other court case that we have, while our lawyer has provided his services pro bono, there are still lots of costs, out-of-pocket costs associated with it, which is mostly court requirements to make copies of papers is what I'm finding, which you would have. Well, you're a lawyer, so you know exactly how much it costs, but through now, we are probably about like $14,000 out of pocket. And so we are fundraising for that. So if you go to lpgeorgia.com, right at the very top, there's like one of those thermometers. We're trying to raise $20,000, and you just click contribute, and that's how you can help fund our ballot access lawsuit.
Great. Well, one of the things we'll get to a little later in the program is how ballot access resources that the National Party raises are being redirected, based on what the needs are around the country. So I appreciate that update from Georgia. At this point, we're going to cut into talk to Bennett Morris, who's the chair of the Libertarian Party of Illinois. Bennett, can you tell us what are the requirements in Illinois for ballot access?
Yeah, so here in Illinois, even though we've been around for 45 years, we're considered a new party. And new parties in Illinois are required to collect 25,000 valid signatures for statewide ballot access. That is for U.S. Senate and the president. We get to run that on one slate. And 5% of the voters in the last election for any other district in Illinois. So that would be state representatives, state Senate, and U.S. Congress, all the way down to the local level. So here in Cook County, if I wanted to run for countywide office, I would have to collect 25,000 signatures just to run for county clerk.
Wow, that's a lot of signatures. But Illinois has in the past been able to gather that many signatures. Do you know how many signatures they gathered? How many did you gather the last go round where you needed 25,000?
It was around 43,000.
Okay.
Signatures. So in terms of validity, we only see that if we get challenged. But we tried to collect 40 to 50,000 signatures just to clear that threshold.
And I think last time they didn't even challenge you because it was obvious that you had so many signatures, you had so overshot the mark that it wasn't going to be worth the time to have a bunch of people going over signatures and trying to disqualify us. That's what was going on?
Yeah, and it's never really worth their time. We have only not made the ballot, I believe, 3 midterm elections since our state affiliate has existed. So in terms of presidential races, people are used to seeing us on the ballot. That's what's normal, and that's part of what we're trying to tell the state is it's normal for people to see the Libertarian Party on the ballot in Illinois, and the COVID situation that we're under right now really is preventing us from having a legitimate election in November. And that's what I've been trying to tell Republicans and Democrats is if you win by, let's say, 5% of the vote, it's possible that your opponent can declare that, well, since not all the candidates from independent to green to libertarian were not able to get on the ballot, we don't have a legitimate election result here. So in order to maintain our democratic process, it's critical that independents, Green Party, any party, including the Libertarians, are given some opportunity to get on the ballot this November under reasonable circumstances.
So that 90-day period in Illinois, has that already started, the period set by law?
Yeah, so our petitioning window starts 1 week after the old party's taxpayer-funded membership drive, which they call the primary. So March 24th is when petitioning starts in Illinois, and petitioning ends, well, we have to turn in on June 22nd. And it takes about a week to put together that giant thousands of pages of petitions. So in order to put together
a tenth of that petitioning period, a tenth of that 90 days is already gone.
Right. And we have the shelter in place until the end of this month. So it's already a month and a week.
Right. And there's no exception in your shelter in place order that the governor imposed to say, well, petitioners can go out with clipboards and talk to thousands of members of the public at close proximity. He didn't put that in the order, did he?
No, he certainly did not. We kept the primary, even though that was right in the middle of when the state was shutting things down. So it seems like for some reason, Governor Pritzker thinks that the coronavirus has no impact on any election process whatsoever. And that's why today we just filed our lawsuit against Governor Pritzker and the State Board of Elections, demanding ballot access for the Libertarian Party and the Green Party.
Now, you didn't start with the lawsuit in Illinois, did you?
No.
Well, how'd you start? Because I think a lot of people are going to have some of these issues in their own state parties and want to know, what's the process look like, on the ground?
As soon as we knew that this would be a problem, we worked with the National Party and council to draft a letter to Governor Pritzker and the State Board of Elections. That letter was delivered, and we received a response from the State Board of Elections indicating that they will not be making any decision and don't have the authority to make any changes, and deferred to the legislature. We have not heard anything from the governor at all.
Okay. And the legislature in Illinois is not in session right now because of all of what's going on. So you have the secretary or the Board of Elections saying we can't do it because we can't change the law. The law says what it says. The legislature has to change it, and the legislature isn't even sitting because they also want to be safe.
Yeah, and that's part of this is we're doing everything we possibly can to get on the ballot. We are contacting General Assembly members, even though they don't know when they're going to be back in session. We do have some friendly General Assembly members that are interested in drafting legislation as soon as they're back in, but we don't know when that is. That it's possible that that they'll be out of session the entire time.
Right.
So yeah, if I could contact Space Force and that would help, I would be contacting Space Force. I mean, it's we're going through the judicial system right now. We tried contacting the governor; he's MIA, and we're trying with the legislature. So we're trying all forms of government to try to get this resolved, and so far, no dice.
Okay, so now there is a lawsuit that's filed, and that asks the courts to step in and change this requirement that's in the law because it is a threat to public health and safety. It's not something that anyone should be made to do. And I think what a lot of people maybe don't realize, and you may not even know this, is we had petitioners out. Some states were able to start petitioning last year. Some states started right at the beginning of January. And so we saw people start to change their habits a lot faster than I think many in the media saw it. And I think that's one of the reasons the Libertarian Party has been able to get out in front of this pandemic response, is we're seeing it on the ground in how people actually behave, where our petitioners would start to get fewer and fewer people even willing to let them approach. They weren't willing to touch a pen. And one of our petitioners was diagnosed with at least a presumptive case of COVID-19 before we had these shelter-at-home orders. So we were looking at what can we do to try and adjust well before the government was involved in this. And we're looking out for the safety of those people who gather, both volunteers and paid petitioners, as well as the safety of the general public. It's not just about us trying to get on the ballot for free. I think there's a misconception, especially in a state like Illinois, where I don't know if you've heard this from anyone that you've talked to. Have they said, well, you just want this relief because you don't want to have to spend the hundred and some $1,000s it would take to get all those signatures?
Thankfully, no one thus far has said anything that stupid.
Okay.
I think we've made our case that this is about public health, and we're complying with the shelter at home, and we're trying to not spread this virus. We're trying to keep our volunteers healthy, and again, this is just a normal process for us. It's really annoying that we have to do this every 2 years and spend all the resources we have to spend, and that we prepared for months for this petition drive and can't petition right now. That's really frustrating. But we simply can't do that and protect our volunteers and protect the public.
Okay. And I have to bring this up because I think a lot of people don't know this. They probably think, well, in Illinois, everybody has to get 25,000 signatures. So I'm sure there's, the old parties are probably trying to get out from under these requirements too. Is that the case, Bennett? In Illinois, do the Republicans and Democrats have to get 25,000 valid signatures?
No, I believe they have to get 0.5% of their votes in the last election. And we have to get 5% of all votes. And that's for the district. That's district-wise. I believe it's around 5,000 signatures for statewide, which is nothing for them.
So basically a fifth of what we have to do.
Yeah, a fifth to 15 times, depending on the district.
And have any Republicans or Democrats kind of pointed that out, or, when did their requirements hit? Have they asked for relief on this?
They have a completely different petitioning window than we do.
Okay.
We are not allowed to participate in the primary process as a new party. So their petitioning was, I believe, ended around Thanksgiving.
So they were able to do it before this year even started.
Yeah, and I mean, our ballot access system in Illinois is awful, and that's horrible for our candidates too, because it's really difficult to confirm that you're on the ballot in August when your opponents have confirmed that they're on the ballot in March. It's really difficult to fundraise if you're a candidate and you can't even say that you're on the ballot. So they already have an advantage just by being able to select their candidates earlier on in the process and exclude alternative parties and independents from being part of that process.
A lot of people watching probably have bought something with a contract or, closed on a house or something where they've used DocuSign or some sort of email type of signature where you can sign without having to be physically present. Is that something in Illinois that you can do for a signature to get a candidate on the ballot?
No, you have to get written signatures, and not only that, but the whole petition. Anything on that petition can be challenged. So we've had problems in the past where the person circulating the petition happened to circulate for another candidate and got all of those signatures that they collected thrown off. So it's not even just the fact that it's a print-only petition. It's the fact that there's all of the requirements pertaining to the petition. They can challenge the notary of the petition. So yeah, every sheet has to be notarized. It has to be bound a certain way, which is why I said it takes a week for us to put together the petition. We just are slaving away in a basement somewhere, and we have to have runners run the petitions because we're a pretty big state geographically. We have to have people from all the way down in southern Illinois, almost Kentucky, all the way up to Chicago. We need to have a central location in the middle of the state where runners are taking these petitions back and assembling this huge stack, like 2-3 feet tall, of petition sheets. So
so
yeah, unfortunately, we can't do digital signatures.
Right. So it sounds like, I mean, they make you build a phone book that no one will ever use
Right.
every 2 years. Maybe one of the glimmers of hope that comes out of this, and you know, something that we see kind of across the whole economy and the whole society, is that this is really changing how we do a lot of things. I mean, we're all getting really good at Zoom meetings. We all are better at lighting and backgrounds than we used to be. Maybe some of these old rules for how ballot access petitioning are done can be changed going forward, even when we're not in a pandemic, just to be more modern, just to fit in with how we live life now.
And we do have some legislators, Republicans and Democrats, who are sympathetic to that. And in the last few General Assembly sessions, we've had ranked choice voting, we've had ballot access relief, we've had digital petitioning offered up, but none of those get past committee. So we are trying to increase our lobbying efforts with the State General Assembly to try to get something passed, because I think even Republicans and Democrats see the candidate guide that basically the State Board of Elections puts out and tells you all the signature requirements and everything for that next cycle. They see that also, and they scratch their heads. So
it's a waste of effort. It's not
Yeah.
spent actually sharing your ideas with the voters. It's not spent for any good purpose other than, you know, it's do the thing to prove you can do the thing, but
Mhm.
it's not a thing anybody cares about.
Right.
Well, I hope that things go well. Is there a way, are you guys keeping this updated on the Libertarian Party of Illinois website? What's going on? How the process is working, things like that?
Yeah, so we have our whole petitioning process on lpillinois.org. It has instructions for petitioners. If you just want to print off a petition and you're in Illinois and you just want your family to sign it, we have Bill Redpath, who I think is coming up next, is our ballot access director here in Illinois. And you can mail your petitions to him. So we are still trying to collect what we can.
Right. Well, and that helps in a lawsuit too. If you're showing that you're doing everything possible, it does help. So lpillinois.org, and that's got all the information. Keep up the good work, Bennett. I'm sorry you get stuck, you know, having to deal with this stuff, but you know, if I'm confident that you guys in Illinois were ready to deal with the normal challenge, and I'm confident that you guys are going to rise to this challenge, and we're all hoping for you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
The next person we're going to bring into the conversation is Bill Redpath, who's chair of the Ballot Access Committee for the Libertarian National Committee. Hi, Bill. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Nick?
I'm doing great. So, Bill, how many states do we have ballot access for our presidential candidate right now, and how many do we have to go?
Well, right now we're talking just presidential candidates here, and just to digress, we're just talking about Illinois. The situation is so bad here in Illinois, and I just moved here in October 2019 from Virginia. Just want to make sure people understand the 25,000 signature petition in Illinois is just for our statewide candidates. This year, that means presidential ticket, U.S. Senate. All the other candidates, down ticket, U.S. House, they have a separate petition. Each U.S. House candidate, and we have a full slate of U.S. House candidates in Illinois this year in all 18 U.S. House districts. They would all have to get over 10,000 valid signatures, so over 15,000 total signatures, approaching 20,000. And what makes it worse is highly gerrymandered districts, particularly in the Chicago area. And just to get on the ballot for state house here, it's over 2,000 valid signatures, again, in highly gerrymandered districts, particularly in the Chicago area. So I just wanted to emphasize how bad things are. I think there is hope in states like Illinois. I remember 10 years ago, I went out to the Libertarian Party of Oklahoma convention. That was the worst state at that time. I lobbied in April 2010 some pretty crusty members of the, not all of them, but some of them were pretty crusty members of the Oklahoma House. But you know what? We kept at it, and we kicked the door down in Oklahoma. And I'm convinced that if it happens there, if it happened there, it can happen in places like Georgia, Illinois, and other states. But we just have to work hard and keep our chin up and work on other states. If it happened in Oklahoma, it can happen here and in Georgia and elsewhere. Now, getting to the question at hand, Mr. Chairman. We have presidential ballot status in 35 states plus DC, and hopefully my dog isn't going to create a ruckus here because the dog next door just came out to bark. But in any event, so that's 36 states if you count DC as a state. So there are 15 states to go. And first of all, there are 7 states where we have 2,000 or fewer signatures to get on the ballot. And those states would be, for a presidential ticket to get on the ballot, those states would be Iowa, Minnesota, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Washington, and Wisconsin.
Okay.
And then there are 3 states where there would be probably need some national help over up to 5,000 signatures, Alabama, Maine, and New Hampshire. And the bigger states, I would say, are Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Illinois, where we still have to go. And in Alaska, we might have to do a petition drive, and we may litigate to try to get on the ballot in Alaska. So basically 15 states to go, 35 plus DC are in the bag for the presidential ticket.
So in all of these states, for ballot access to get those petition requirements, whether it's the 275 to get on as an independent in the state of Tennessee, up to, the 25,000 valid in Illinois, none of those states right now allow for any kind of electronic signatures, do they?
That is correct. To the best of my knowledge, that is correct. There are some states that are trying to do something along those lines, but I think there's a very tough operational question, okay? If you can do it, but how do you actually get it done? That's the missing link here, so to speak. That is, there's an old saying about life insurance that from years ago that said life insurance isn't purchased, it's sold. And that's definitely the way, it's definitely the way it is with petitioning. There are loads of people out there who are willing to sign a Libertarian Party petition, but they have to be asked to do it. They won't do it on their own. And I guess my question is, I'm all for some sort of modernization to make this effort easier. But the thing is, how do we get people to sign the digital petitions if they are available?
So it sounds like, but for this year, in those 15 states, we need to get some kind of relief from the dangerous act of going out and carrying a clipboard and talking to hundreds or thousands of people every single day in close physical proximity when there's a virus going around that's more infectious when you don't look like you have symptoms.
Right, that's absolutely true. And a concern of mine is, all right, once we get the, I won't call it an all clear, but we have the shelter in place order in Illinois now through April 30. Suppose we can legally go out and petition on May 1. What's the public reaction going to be? My concern is that there may be, I hope not, but there may be long-term ramifications that negatively impact the old style of petitioning, so to speak, not just this year, but maybe even going into the future. And that's going to be a real concern as we move forward and still have to petition the old-fashioned way.
So do you think it's best that we do basically a two-pronged effort? We do the things like Ryan and Bennett are talking about with sending the letter and then filing the lawsuit to try and deal with this year, but we also do some of the stuff like Bennett was talking about where we go to the legislature and say, it's different now. We need to change some of these requirements. We need to reduce some of these requirements. We need to make it so that this silly hurdle isn't there anymore, not just because of the infectious disease problem for this cycle, but in general, what we've seen in a lot of places with medical licensing, with the FDA, with hand sanitizer, with all these things around this pandemic, there are all of these regulations that are in place, and we're able to reduce them in an emergency. And it really raises this question of, do we want to bring them back after the emergency, or do we want to come out of this with something different?
Yes, I mean, the thing is getting the attention of, I called my state rep a couple of times. I have not gotten a call back. He is sympathetic to ballot access. Look, he may very well be, probably is legitimately busy. It's a tough job being a state rep or a state senator. And I have not spoken. I've tried to speak with my state senator. His administrative assistant definitely knows. I didn't me how bad ballot access laws are in Illinois. And she did call me back and say, my state senator is very busy. He will call me. I don't know. That was a couple of weeks ago. I haven't heard one word. So the problem is competing for the attention of these people in the general assemblies of the various states. I think we need to go that route first, but we need to keep them on a short leash, as we have here in Illinois. Because the suit got filed today. I think that's what it's going to take to get their attention, unfortunately.
Okay. There's another issue that you probably know a lot more about than a lot of people in the Libertarian Party, having worked on ballot access for so long. There are different deadlines in different states for when a party has to put a presidential candidate on. And we've been dealing with issues related to the national convention and making sure we have contingency planning. And one of the contingencies people have talked about is, can we delay our convention in the way that the Democrats, I think, just decided they're going to delay their convention into August with the hope that that's after people are able to travel more freely, there aren't quarantine orders and things like that. What states do you know of where there are early requirements for us to actually give them the name of a nominee that make delaying the convention something that might jeopardize ballot access?
Well, there are some states that have deadlines in July, late July. Most of them are in August. We had our convention about the 4th of July weekend, 1996, and when Harry Brown was the nominee for the first time. And we got the presidential ticket in 96 on the ballot, Harry Brown and Joe Jorgensen on the ballot in all 50 states and D.C. with the 4th of July national convention. It was a tight fit with some of those states, but I think that because look, the Republicans and Democrats already are on the ballot, they don't have to worry about gathering signatures, and a lot of these states don't allow substitution. That is, on the Illinois petition, we stand in candidates on the petition because we can then later substitute the actual presidential ticket for their names onto the Illinois ballot. But that is not the case in a number of states where there is no substitution allowed, and we have to have the names of the presidential ticket. So that's going to make it very difficult to achieve 50 state ballot status for the presidential ticket if we have our presidential ticket set after the 4th of July. And even then, it's going to be a push in certain states. But I think that's where the train leaves the station, I think, about the 4th of July.
So not only do we have this challenge of having to go to these states where we need to get petition signatures, go to the Secretary of State, go to the governor, go to the Board of Elections, ask for help, ask them to recognize it's an emergency, sometimes get told no, have to file a lawsuit, have to go down this path to make sure that we have a petitioning opportunity, or we don't need to do the petitioning, that we can get through that hurdle. It sounds like if this lockdown lasts longer than we think it's going to last, which is entirely possible, it's a very fluid situation, we'll also need to be going to some states and asking for them to change deadlines for us to submit the name of a candidate or a nominee or do a filing. And do you think that with the other parties shifting their national conventions, do you think we may be able to make common cause maybe with Republicans and Democrats in certain states where having their convention later also puts them in this same spot where, if we all have the same problem, maybe we can all go ask together?
They just changed the rules to scratch each other's backs. Come on. I mean, it's really funny, and it's actually been good for us, but a lot of ballot access laws have been made easier. There's been liberalization when a major party is screwed up, and then suddenly there's a problem. And then they'll fix the ballot access laws to accommodate one of the major parties, older parties, I should say, one of the older parties that screwed up, and we benefit from it ultimately. But that wasn't the real reason they did it. They did it because they love their duopoly, and at the end of the day, they're going to pass whatever laws are necessary on a fast basis, on an expedited basis, to accommodate each other's ballot access.
Did you hear about what happened in Colorado with their emergency session?
No.
So they had an emergency session of the state legislature, and it was right before everything was going to get locked down and they were going to send all the legislators home. And it just happened that the Colorado legislative director was there. They were debating a bill that would change the deadlines to make it so they'd be later, so that, political parties wouldn't have a deadline that came up while there was some sort of national pandemic and an emergency. And it was only because our legislative director was there in the chamber, the Libertarian Party legislative director was there and heard this debate, that he noticed that it didn't cover the Libertarian Party, that they had thought about themselves, but they had forgotten about us for some reason or another, and was able to go to the members of the committee and point that out. And they were very, gracious and changed it so that it covered all of the parties. But had we not had somebody paying attention there, that we might have been screwed in Colorado, which is a state that we usually don't worry about at all as far as a ballot access thing. And so I think, like you were talking about with Oklahoma, one of the things we need to be doing is paying attention to any sort of these emergency legislative sessions that are happening, and making sure that if they're touching these kind of requirements, like you said, to fix things for one of the older parties, that we make sure that we get the same kind of fix, that they don't inadvertently or on purpose create another situation like in Illinois, where there's different rules depending on whether you're one of the parties that is in the legislature versus one of the parties that isn't at the table.
Yeah, it was a good catch, like I said, it's a tough job being a legislator. They've got a lot of stuff going on. A lot of people want to speak to them, to pitch their cause or their interest. So I think in a lot of circumstances, it is innocent. I mean, there are a lot of state legislators that don't know the ballot access laws of their state. I mean, most of them probably don't. So but like I said, they'll change the rules a couple of times in Virginia, for instance. The Libertarian Party benefited in Virginia because we only have to do 5,000 valid signatures now for president. Why did that come about? Because Virginia, to be fair, makes presidential candidates of the older parties gather as many signatures as we have to gather to get on the ballot for the general election. And back in 2012, there were only two of the Republican candidates for president, Ron Paul and Mitt Romney. Out of all the candidates running for the presidential nomination in 2012, only two of them got enough signatures. All the other people didn't make the ballot out of 10 or 12, and it was embarrassing for the Republican Party in Virginia. So they changed the laws to make it easier to get on the ballot for the primary, and changed the laws that made it easier for us to get on the ballot. So that's an example of a situation where we do get a benefit, but it wasn't meant for us. So I think that it's a situation where we just got to keep lobbying, particularly in the difficult states, and take our case more to the press and the court of public opinion. People from other nations are shocked. People from other nations are shocked when they hear how many signatures it takes to get on the ballot for an election in the United States. And we need to, I think, bring up examples of other nations and say, we are ostensibly the beacon of democracy in this world, but look how awful people who don't fall in line with the Republicans and Democrats are treated.
Yeah, it sounds like, you make a good point. Legislators have a lot of things to do. And so we do need to take advantage when they're looking at a problem like this that they may not have even known was a problem. We need to make sure that we're at the table. We get to tell them what's going on and what ways they can fix it. So that a lot of what we do in an election year is ballot access. It's making sure that we have that 50-state ballot access that gives us that legitimacy in the eyes of the public. And we raise a lot of money to do that. And people can donate at lp.org/ballot access. In this interesting time that we're in, what we can redirect those funds to lobbying or litigation if it's related to ballot access, right, Bill?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the LNC can alter the budget for the national party at any time, and then within broad categories, then it's up to the executive director and the chair and the employees of the LNC to spend that money prudently.
Right. And so if it's a ballot access fund and it's to make sure that we have our candidates on the ballot, that covers however we have to do it, whether it's by people standing out there with a clipboard or it's by a lawyer in court, getting a judge to fix the problem for us. So we're about 10 minutes out from being done with tonight. So let's bring everybody back in. And then, if you have questions, for Bill or Ryan or Bennett or myself about what's going on, we can cover some of those. I know some people are asking, what can we do to get more coverage for our candidates right now? Because one of the things that petitioning provides the opportunity for, although you shouldn't do too much of it, is to go out and talk to the public and say, hey, we're libertarians, we have a different way of looking at politics, we're another alternative. And so it's a little bit of campaigning with petitioning. What are you guys seeing in your states that your candidates are doing to maintain some momentum and still have that interaction with the public in this period where you don't get to go out in public as much?
Some of our candidates are creating videos at home or joining podcasts. Really, right now, social media is probably the most important thing you can do to campaign. Just simply because that's really the only choice you have. You can't really go down the street and kiss babies.
Yeah, for us, it's all social media. In Georgia, we actually have a podcast, the Georgia Liberty Cast. We try to do weekly, and we had Martin Cowan on our last episode, and I plan on having other candidates on while this is going on. Shane Hazel is actually our candidate for U.S. Senate, and he has a podcast already, The Rebellion. It's pretty popular, but he's pretty good about getting media out there. He's been doing some videos. He did a live, Ask Me Anything, and just making sure that there's still touches. We're all learning how to do this thing, so.
That's awesome. I think, one of the things that has been very important to stress, and we've stressed it when we talk to legislators, we've stressed it when we talk to the public, I've stressed it when I go out in the media, is what we're doing right now as far as not going out and interacting with the public is not so much about us, right? Most of us libertarians tend to be younger. We're not as medically fragile often. Some of us are, but not all of us. And a lot of us would probably live and maybe not even show symptoms. It's about what you do to other people, right? Part of being a libertarian is about how you treat others. And if you're going out and potentially carrying something that could hurt them or hurt a loved one of theirs, we don't want to do that to other people. So, a lot of one of the things that's been very frustrating, and I hate to pick on the CDC because they're down there in Georgia, Ryan, but
it's fine.
They early on said people shouldn't wear masks, but what we're seeing is the transmission rates in countries that have a high usage of masks, just even cloth surgical masks, places like South Korea and Taiwan, they're having less transmission of the virus. And the point is that, a cloth mask isn't going to protect you against every virus particle. And if you're a doctor, that's not good enough. But if you're going out in public and you cough, and I notice, everyone's doing good coughing hygiene and muting their mics, and coughing into your elbow. If you cough into a mask, fewer of the particles from whatever's in your body get out there into the air. So it's more about protecting others than about protecting yourself. And, one of the things that we've looked at potentially as the party is bringing up, some kind of mask or bandana, to show people what our values are. I also want to make sure that I recognize Danny Maloof, who's, I believe, an Illinois candidate, for donating to the Ballot Access Fund during the show, which is always awesome. Bennett, can you tell us about Danny?
Yeah, Danny's awesome. He was actually running to try to change the Republican Party from the inside. I know a lot of people have heard that before. Just because they have it's easier to get on the ballot. He was running for Congress, and I had an excellent conversation with him, trying to encourage him to ditch the GOP and join the LP and be our U.S. Senate candidate. And he's an awesome young voice for liberty, and yeah, he's one of those candidates that's still campaigning, still putting out videos, still doing as much as he can to get out there. And he and Joshua Flynn, who's one of our state representative candidates, they both have built teams before all this happened, which is something that should be obvious to anyone, but we have had candidates that just come to the convention and get nominated, and then they put their staff together. Well, Danny and Josh Flynn have done a great job putting together their campaign teams and getting out ahead of this before they were even nominated.
That's awesome. One of the things that I think is so important to know is there are still a lot of libertarian candidates who are already running for office, and every day as stuff like, the $2.2 trillion bailout comes down the pike, more and more people get angry, more and more people get upset, and they want something different. And we're still recruiting candidates right now. If you visit lp.org, there's a run for office link. Sign up and we'll get you connected with your state party. We'll get you the right people who want to help you run for office, provide a different option. One of the things I'm seeing so much, in talking to people who aren't libertarians, is they see how the government that is currently staffed mostly with old party politicians from the other two parties, that those politicians are not handling this crisis well. They're doing all the wrong things. They're getting in the way of things like testing. They are spending money on corporate bailouts when, what we really need is to deal with the medical issue. They're scoring political points on each other and getting into fights on television and pointing fingers and blame and writing, stupid letters insulting other politicians. And they're looking around and going, somebody has to know that politics is about something better for the country, something better for our state, something better for, the people. And libertarians have been saying this forever. This is our opportunity to shine. Anytime, to use a politician that came from Illinois, anytime you have a crisis, there's a lot of change. There's a lot of things that are different. And there's opportunity in crises. And we don't want to use those opportunities to try and gain some sort of partisan advantage. We want to use those opportunities to show people, hey, what we did, what you had voted for before isn't working. Here's an opportunity. So I would encourage you, through this whole crisis, what I've said is we follow Mr. Rogers when he said in a time of crisis, you want to look for the helpers. So look for the helpers in your community. Look for the people who are filing these lawsuits or who are running for office and showing the libertarian flag and giving another option to the voters. And then see what you can do to help the helpers. Check with your state party leadership. Who's running in your area? Can you maybe do their campaign finance filings? Can you help them on social media? Can you do some phone banking since we're all stuck at home? Can you, send text messages to your friends? And definitely, if you can, I know financially not everybody can, but if you are able to, visit lp.org/ballot access, contribute to this fight. That ballot access is what's going to let us be in the right place. Wayne Gretzky always said, in hockey, you go to where the puck's gonna be, not where the puck is. And Woody Allen said, 80% of success is showing up. And ballot access is what lets us show up. Thank you all for joining us tonight. for LPTV. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us as guests. And go out there, be safe, and have a great week.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, Nick.